An early morning fire rips through a home in Bemidji, Minnesota. Firefighters race to the scene.
When I got there, there was still smoke in the air, but they primarily had the fire extinguished.
Buried in the debris and still smoldering home, a horrible tragedy. The body of the homeowner, Melissa Norby.
It seemed really odd because the main bulk of the fire had burned in a southwest bedroom, but then her body was in the middle of the house and had what appeared to be a mattress over the top.
Deputy Fire Marshal Kevin Molly is called to investigate and immediately notices something suspicious. Melissa's body and the mattress are both badly burned.
Quite a bit more than what you would expect from a fire that would have started a few rooms away.
And that wasn't all.
When we walked around the outside, some of the things that we noticed were windows that had literally been blown away from the building 12, 15 feet.
Evidence of explosives is easy to find.
Bruce, could you shine the light on that gas can again? I'm just going to videotape it.
Detective Mike Solemn is the man behind the camera.
Parts of the trailer had been totally destroyed, but the victim's bedroom hadn't been destroyed completely, so the gas can was still intact.
Investigators quickly rule the cause of the fire is arson. And if this fire is no accident, Melissa's death likely isn't either.
We looked at the victim when we saw her hands were bound with tape. Appeared to be duct tape. Then we backed out and got the BCA involved.
Melissa Norby was a 35-year-old single mother who loved ones called Missy. She and Amanda Smith had been friends since they were kids.
She had the biggest heart ever. You needed something, she'd be there. You know, it's just how she was.
Before investigators could start collecting evidence, they had a far more pressing matter to attend to.
The victim's 10 or 11-year-old boy that may be inside the house that they couldn't find yet.
Neighbors tell investigators that Melissa lives in the home with her young son, but there was no sign of the boy.
Once we'd removed the victim and we continued to dig for what we thought would be a 10 or 11-year-old boy, we completely searched every square inch of that home, including outside, underneath the mobile home.
Cops finally reach a relative and are relieved to learn Melissa's son was safe. He had spent the night with family in the Twin Cities area.
That kind of gave us a little bit of a breather.
But investigators wouldn't have long to catch their breaths. While sifting through the burned-out home, searching for clues, Melissa's friend Amanda comes running up to the scene.
How did you hear there was a fire at Missy's home?
Her cousin called me.
Amanda couldn't believe what Missy's cousin was saying.
She was hysterical and she said, "Please tell me it's not true." And I'm like, "What?" And she says, "Tell me Missy's house is not on fire." So I freaked and got in my truck and I took off, and my boys hopped in the truck with me and they were like, "What's going on?" And I'm like, I gotta go.
It wasn't just the shock that her childhood friend had died in the fire. Amanda's 5-year-old daughter had spent the night at Melissa's house.
You knew Brittany was inside.
Mm-hmm.
Amanda and her sons were at the scene within minutes.
I kept telling them my daughter's in that house.
She had no idea investigators had already been through the house many times, initially fearing Melissa's son could be inside. They were confident there were no other bodies.
Our fire marshal's office that we work with every day said, "Nope, she's not in the fire, Chad." And that, to us, was kind of the beginning of, wow, this is more than we thought it was.
If Brittany's remains weren't there, where was she? Senior Special Agent Chad Musaeus is with the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension.
We think, well, there's got to be a common sense, easy explanation for what's going on here.
Detectives narrowed down what could have possibly happened to the 5-year-old.
She escaped the fire, saw flames, smelled smoke, got scared, or she's with somebody else and she's safe.
Amanda Smith was desperately hoping that's what happened to her only daughter.
Did investigators keep coming out to say, "We can't find her"?
Yeah. Are you sure she's here? Are you sure she didn't give her to somebody else?
Amanda tells cops she's certain Melissa wouldn't have given her daughter to someone else without her permission.
I had asked Amanda what their fire safety plan was at home, what would she do? And she was convinced that she would just stay with Melissa.
The woods around Melissa's house are searched, along with her neighbors' cars and homes, but the little girl is nowhere to be found.
At some point, investigators started questioning you.
Yeah, it was kind of like they were pointing fingers, like we knew what was going on. Like, where's your daughter?
As soon as the flames are extinguished at this home in Bemidji, Minnesota, investigators rule it a case of arson and murder. The homeowner, Melissa Norby's body, found under a mattress.
How was Melissa murdered?
She's fully clothed. She's duct taped, bound. She was choked.
Hours into the investigation, Amanda Smith tells cops that Melissa was babysitting her 5-year-old daughter the night of the fire.
So here you are, grieving the loss of your best friend of 30 years and not knowing where your daughter is.
Right.
The burned-out home and neighborhood are thoroughly searched, but the little girl is nowhere to be found.
We thought they were wrong. We didn't believe them.
Michelle Rogalski is the girl's godmother.
At what point were you told this was arson?
Because of the way things looked, everybody figured that right from the start. The way the house was burned and stuff didn't look like an accident.
Who were police looking at?
They told us nothing in the beginning.
Cops were already looking at the missing girl's parents.
You have to say, wait a second here. What's mom and dad's role in this?
The night of the fire, cops learned Melissa's son had left to stay with relatives while she and the girl had a sleepover.
Amanda tells me she allowed her daughter to stay here at Missy's house at least 20 different times over the course of her little life. This is someone Amanda trusted, someone she knew for 30 years.
The cops haul in Amanda and the girl's father for questioning, and their phones are searched.
Did you have any idea where she was?
No, none at all.
And you had no idea who would want to take her or hurt her?
Right.
After a few hours, investigators were fairly certain Brittany's parents had no involvement in their daughter's disappearance.
I'm trusting my gut, and I'm like, these are parents who are truly concerned about their missing 5-year-old.
That's also when they begin to realize the magnitude of what they were dealing with.
The dots didn't connect to any of us until we were several hours into the investigation.
By now, investigators wonder, did someone murder Melissa and set fire to her house, all in an elaborate ruse to kidnap the little girl?
It's the worst news you could get. And as an investigator, we're behind the 8 ball already because we didn't immediately know that we had a missing child.
The search for a killer arsonist had quickly turned into a frantic search for a 5-year-old girl.
Who were some of the persons of interest you looked at, besides Amanda and Scott?
She had an ex-boyfriend that she saw. They'd broken off for several years, and then it was rekindled.
Detectives Heather Holden and Michelle Leffelman immediately track Melissa's ex-boyfriend.
Was he cooperative?
He was. He had a conviction for an arson fire in the past. That was definitely a concern that he could be our suspect at that point.
But the ex-boyfriend's alibi checks out, so cops began building a lengthy list of other possible suspects.
When we found out we had a missing 5-year-old from the scene, it expanded exponentially at that point, and we just looked at all of our predatory offenders in the city and county and started asking for consent to search their homes.
Cops questioned one of Melissa's neighbors, who babysat her son from time to time.
Allegedly, Melissa and him had a sexual relationship.
But he was also cleared, along with many others.
At that point, we're talking to everyone that our decedent is talking to on social media, anyone that she had dated in the past, neighbors, co-workers. We're talking to everybody who knows our victim.
Those talks would yield investigative gold. During a conversation with one of Melissa's friends, investigators soon learned disturbing details about the single mom's sex life.
Melissa was very into, it's not S&M, but more like a daddy, little girl kind of scenarios that she was playing out with Chance.
Tuesday Colopy tells cops Chance is the name Melissa gave to a man she had been secretly dating on and off. She claims at times the sex was rough and had even turned violent.
It ended in him punching her and choking her out and putting her over the back of the SUV and raping her.
Tuesday isn't the only friend Melissa confided in about her relationship. After a few more interviews, detectives learn Chance's real name is Jake, and he owns a food truck called Jake's Eats. They immediately know who everyone is talking about.
We discovered that our dead victim was dating Jacob Kinn. And we knew Jacob Kinn, we knew his history, and we went, oh my God.
Jacob Kinn was a registered sex offender, well known to law enforcement in Bemidji.
And what was his past criminal history?
He actually put an ad out on Craigslist asking to take photos of a young girl. And we, the sheriff's office here, sent an undercover deputy. She posed as the mother of a 8-9-year-old girl. And he was convicted on some charges related to that.
Jacob Kinn was still on probation for that offense. But now he was also the prime suspect in the murder of Melissa Norby and the kidnapping of a 5-year-old girl. Cops needed to find him quickly.
At that point, we are scrambling to try to figure out where he is. How do we find him, and how do we find her?
Detectives Holden and Leffelman were the first to arrive at Jacob's house.
We went out to the house that he had and searched that at about 10:30 at night.
But hearts sink when they see no sign of Jacob or the girl. So detectives hatch a plan to get some help from Jacob's probation officer.
We had probation call him, a non-threatening phone call. Hey, we have a missing child. Police would like to talk to you about it. And he agreed to come in and meet us.
Nearly 20 hours after Melissa Norby is murdered, her home set on fire, and the 5-year-old girl she was babysitting abducted, cops were knocking on the door of her on-again, off-again boyfriend, Jacob Kinn.
This is someone who was already on your radar, in a small sense.
Yeah, it was a name that we knew.
Jacob Kinn was a registered sex offender.
He was obsessed with child porn. He would almost continuous throughout the day access some image sharing sites of young girls.
When detectives first arrived at his house around 10 o'clock that night, Jacob wasn't home.
So we decided, let's ping his phone.
Special Agent Paul Girardi says they asked Jacob's probation officer to contact him to face questions about the now missing child, Brittany.
It's common that registered sex offenders, you're going to get talked to if a child goes missing in your community.
Shortly after midnight, Jacob Kinn willingly walks into the sheriff's station.
Appreciate you coming in. Did your probation officer tell you what's going on?
Jacob tells Detective Girardi and Senior Special Agent Chad Musaeus that he's already heard about the fire, murder, and missing girl. Right away, he admits to knowing Melissa Norby.
I haven't talked to her in like 6 or 8 months.
Jacob says the two once worked together. About an hour into the interrogation, he learns the real reason he's called in.
We got reports that you had a relationship with Melissa.
Jacob says he heard the same thing and believes he knows why Melissa would be spreading the rumor.
I was dating another girl at work and she got off.
Jacob insists he and Melissa never had sex.
I wasn't the least bit attracted to her.
Detectives then show Jake a picture of the missing child, and he admits he's seen her before.
She showed me a picture of her once a long time ago.
Who did?
Melissa.
He identifies our missing 5-year-old's photo, and I'm thinking in my head, wait a second. She's 5, you saw her when she was 2, and you can immediately recognize her as somebody you know?
Cops ask Jacob where he's been for the last 48 hours.
Instead of starting 2 days from now, let's start backwards. So, where'd you just come from?
What Jacob didn't know is that before he arrived for questioning, detectives had already determined his location through phone records based on his probation officer's call.
Well, I was fishing up north.
Okay. Fishing where?
Clear Lake.
Clear Lake is about 50 miles north of Bemidji, but Jacob's cell phone actually pinged in a town called Big Fork, about 40 miles southeast of Clear Lake. Jacob tells detectives he was fishing from shore at a resort, but he can't remember the name.
Was there somebody there that saw you there? The resort owner?
No.
Can you describe it to us? Kind of help us out a little bit with that.
Just a resort.
When Detective Musaeus steps out of the room to get a map, Jacob asks why detectives are so curious about his exact fishing location.
I'm still not seeing why that matters at all.
I'll tell you why. Basically, Jake, your cell phone doesn't put you in that spot tonight.
Well, that's where I was.
If you were here, there's cell phone towers, your cell phone would have put you at, instead of being, way over here.
Despite the cell phone ping, Jacob insists he had been fishing at Clear Lake.
I don't know how that would have happened, but yeah, I wasn't in Big Fork. I had no reason to be in Big Fork.
Detectives believe they know exactly why he was there. They quickly turn the conversation, pleading with Jacob to tell them where the girl is.
Jake, something bad happened. If something got out of control and somebody ended up dead, and this little girl is somewhere, whether she's alive or whether she's gone, we have an obligation to everyone to bring her home. Jake, if you can help us with that in any way.
I would if I could, but I don't know where she's at.
Detectives ask if they can search his vehicle, but Jacob refuses.
Why won't you let us search her?
Because at this point, I don't trust you guys.
Cops were now certain Jacob had murdered Melissa and abducted the girl. They desperately try everything to keep him from leaving, but time is running out.
You can either go get me the judge's order right now. No, like right this second, or I am walking out the door and taking my car with me.
At one point, with one of the detectives out of the room, Jacob tries to bolt.
You're not going. Sit down.
No.
Sit down. Sit down.
You said I was free to leave.
Sit down.
You said I was free to leave.
Sit down.
At this point, sir, you're going to have a seat. Okay?
At this point, I want to call an attorney.
You can call whoever you want.
Have a seat.
After 4 hours, he offers to leave some of his personal items, but cops have no choice but to let Jacob Kinn go.
We take his clothes, we take his Jeep, we take his phone. We literally send him home because at that point, we don't really know quite what we have yet.
But that was all about to change.
I yelled, bingo. I said, you guys gotta come look at this.
After questioning registered sex offender Jacob Kinn for 4 hours about a kidnapping and murder in Bemidji, Minnesota, cops have no choice but to let him go.
Did you know, when you released him, that he held the answers to where this little girl was?
Definitely. It was him, no doubt in our minds. It was him.
And watching him walk out that door had to be tough.
Yeah.
Jacob had willingly left behind plenty of evidence for investigators: his clothes, vehicle, and most importantly, his cell phone.
That phone data unlocked a whole new area that just really turned this case upside down for us.
Minutes after Jacob had walked out of the sheriff's station, Special Agents William Bennett and Jacob Hod used special equipment to access everything on his phone. Some of what they find, they expected to see on the phone of a convicted child predator.
You could see his sexual desires, is what he was into, because his phone was full of other images of other kids.
But it's what they didn't expect to find that leaves them stunned. A series of deleted text messages they were about to recover.
I couldn't believe it. I was actually sitting here, and the investigators were at the main table going over the case and what to do next and what steps, and I yelled, bingo. I said, you guys gotta come look at this.
The texts were between Jacob Kinn and Melissa Norby. The babysitter who was murdered and then set on fire inside her home. The messages detail an elaborate plan between the two to kidnap the 5-year-old daughter of Melissa's best friend.
I've never seen something documented so complete.
According to the text messages, the kidnapping was actually supposed to happen a week earlier. Remember, Amanda Smith, Brittany's mother, told cops that Melissa often took care of the little girl at her house.
But I think the little girl got sick or something happened that it didn't work out, so he was pretty upset that she wasn't coming over.
Melissa and Jacob first hatched a crazy random attack while she was watching the girl.
The initial plan was that Melissa was going to be assaulted, carjacked basically, and some unknown man was going to take Brittany.
Once the little girl was in their own clutches, they'd hide the child so Jacob could keep her for himself.
So then once the carjacking was supposed to have taken place, then Melissa was then, obviously they'd have Brittany and it was going to be Jacob's toy, as he called her.
Why would Melissa allow someone to hurt her best friend's daughter?
She definitely wanted to do anything she could to have a relationship with him, and at all costs.
Think she loved him?
I think she wanted to be loved.
Do you think Jacob Kinn loved Melissa?
Not in the least bit. Jacob Kinn only maintained that relationship with Melissa because he could have access to a little girl.
Investigators may never know for sure why the kidnapping plot wasn't carried out the way Melissa and Jacob had discussed, but Senior Special Agent Chad Musaeus has an idea. That Jacob had his very own diabolical plan.
So she willingly, in my estimation anyway, willingly was bound and tied up, and then at the last seconds of her life choked out because Jacob Kinn didn't want a witness to the abduction.
Whatever role Melissa Norby may have played in the abduction didn't matter in that moment. The only thing that did was finding the little girl.
We know the statistics. We know what is likely happened. And we're scrambling.
Even though Jacob Kinn told investigators he had been fishing at Clear Lake, a cell phone ping put him in an area known as Big Fork, about 80 miles from the town of Bemidji. During the time detectives were busy questioning Jacob at the station, Special Agents Don Newhouse and Rob Frack with the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension were told to head to Big Fork to start searching for the girl. It was the middle of the night and not a streetlight in sight.
It's been described as finding a needle in a haystack. Is that accurate?
Yeah, when you're driving out there, it can be pretty overwhelming when you're looking at all the thousands of acres of land where you could hide somebody.
But before leaving the sheriff's station, the men got a good look at Jacob's Jeep.
The undercarriage had a lot of vegetation, grass, yellow and white flowers hanging from the undercarriage, muddy tires. It's pretty clear that he was out, we figured, in a wet area, possibly driving in a hayfield or somewhere he had to go through a lot of grass and wildflowers.
That didn't exactly narrow down the search area. Much of Big Fork is rural. Fortunately, back at the sheriff's station, a phone call leads to a critical clue.
The dispatcher says, wait a second here. We have a Kinn who owns property in that same area, 3.1 miles from the cell phone tower.
Jacob Kinn's family owns property in the area. Don and Rob make it to Big Fork just as the sun was coming up.
We got to Big Fork right about the time where we could start seeing things without a flashlight or headlights.
Another advantage, compliments of Mother Nature. A heavy downpour overnight.
A lot of the roads in the areas that we were checking are dirt roads, and that's a relatively rural area, and there shouldn't be a lot of traffic up and down some of those roads.
They knew if anyone had driven in the area recently, there would be fresh tire marks. The two men start making their way from the cell phone tower to the direction of the ping from Jacob's phone. Just as they reach the road leading towards the Kinn's family property.
That's where you could see clearly that there are tire tracks coming off of the gravel road onto the pavement, dirt deposited on the pavement, And we stopped right there and Rob started taking photos.
The tracks matched the tires on Kinn's Jeep.
You knew you were on the right path.
That was the only lead that we had at that point.
So what do? Do you drive out there or do you walk?
On that particular spot, we drove down the gravel road cautiously, looking off to the right and left, with our windows rolled down, trying not to drive on top of these tire tracks. We didn't want to lose the tire tracks.
After about a half mile, the gravel road came to an end, and it was clear which direction they needed to go.
Nobody had driven down that road for weeks, except for those tire tracks that were in and out after it had rained.
The men get out and start to follow the tracks on foot.
So this is the area where you parked and then walked?
Correct,
That's
yeah.
right.
And at this point, you still had no idea where you were going?
We knew the tracks were going that way. We had no idea how far back the tracks are going.
Just over 24 hours after a 5-year-old little girl was kidnapped and her babysitter murdered, Special Agents Don Newhouse and Rob Frack knew they were getting close to finding her. What they didn't know, would she be dead or alive?
Is your heart in your throat?
It had been for a half hour before that. We didn't know what we were going to find.
A ping to Jacob Kinn's cell phone is what brought them to this field in Big Fork, Minnesota. And fresh tire tracks matching his Jeep confirmed the registered sex offender had just been there.
Had it not been for the tracks, like Rob says, we would have been focusing our efforts somewhere else.
After walking about half a mile, detectives spot a camper off in the distance. The tire tracks they were following led right to it.
I'm actually on the phone because our bosses are basically curious as to how things are going. We're giving them a play-by-play on what we're seeing, basically telling them we're going to know pretty soon, one way or another, good or bad, what happened to this little girl.
The door to the camper was taped shut with electrical tape. Rob removes the tape and slowly opens the door.
And then Rob starts talking to someone in the camper.
Okay, you don't have to be scared, okay? We're the police.
And that was something.
At what point do you start recording?
The incredible moment that follows is all captured on Rob's cell phone camera.
Hi, what did you say your name was again? I'm gonna take a little video.
My name's Brittany.
Brittany, how'd you get here, Brittany?
His friend got me here.
Both men are trembling with adrenaline and joy. It's Brittany, alive and talking.
Oh, what's his name? Okay, when did he bring you here?
Right now.
The little girl was even able to describe the vehicle that Missy's friend was driving.
Wait, and it has a name on it.
Can you show me your feet? Right there? Okay. Where are you taped at? Okay, anywhere else? Did you have tape on your arms?
She shows the officers scrapes and bruises on her arms and says it's the only thing that hurts.
My name's Rob and this is Don. How old are you?
Probably 5 or something.
Probably 5 or something? Okay.
We started talking about how she got there, and she told us about Missy's friend bringing her there.
Did you go to his house at all? Do you know what color his house is? What's it look like?
What?
Is it a big house or a small house?
Small house.
Okay.
Does he have any animals or no? Okay.
The mama cat has baby kittens.
Oh, okay.
Have you ever heard a 5-year-old be so strong and so articulate?
Never. For what she had just experienced and how she was acting and presenting herself, what a brave little girl.
It had been a long, sleepless night for the little girl's mom. Then the phone call she'll never forget.
What did he say to you?
We have your daughter.
At some point your phone rings. Who's on the other end?
It was Amanda. And she was crying and she just said, they found her. And I said, and? And she said, Nikki, she's alive. And I just lost it. I remember collapsing onto the bed in the hotel room and just crying.
After rescuing Brittany from the camper, Dawn takes this photo of the girl in Rob's arms and sends it to their colleagues.
I grab my phone and I see a picture of Rob holding Brittany. Alive. She's right there, alive. The text message says, arrest him.
About 90 minutes later, Jacob Kinn is spotted behind the wheel of his dad's truck heading north. He's pulled over and taken into custody.
He's located on his way back out to that camper in Big Fork.
You believe he was going to kill her?
Either he was gonna kill her or move her or hide her or do something to keep us from finding her.
Hours after he was released, following a night of questioning, Jacob Kinn was back at the police station.
All right, Jake, you're under arrest. Okay, see that? You see that?
Jacob Kinn was given one last chance to come clean, unaware the girl had been rescued and his kidnapping plot uncovered through deleted text messages.
Last night when we talked, you said you had no contact with Melissa Norby. You didn't date her. Is that true? Yeah. And you had no contact with the little girl. You didn't see her at Melissa's house. Yeah. And there's going to be no connection between you and her.
Right.
And
whatsoever, in any way, shape, or form. Whatsoever.
After a couple minutes, Jacob wants to know why he's being arrested.
What changed between 2 hours ago and now?
That's when Special Agent Paul Girardi shows him what changed, revealing the picture of the little girl in the arms of Detective Rob Frack.
Now, start over.
We know more than you think we do right now. And now's the time for you to fill in those blanks.
Jacob admits being at Melissa's house the night of the fire and kidnapping.
Did you know that she was going to be there?
Yeah.
Jacob claims the girl was there once before when he visited.
What was all?
To be looked at for the most part.
Kind of like viewing porn while you're having sex.
But that was about all Jacob was willing to say.
I do want an attorney.
Okay.
Detectives say in the early morning hours of June 22, 2016, Jacob Kinn choked Melissa Norby to death with a belt during sex. He then brought the girl she was babysitting to his house, where he raped her and left her tied up. He returned to Melissa's and set the house on fire. Later that night, he brought the girl out to the camper in Big Fork. Thankfully, little Brittany did not have to tell her story of torture and abuse in open court. Jacob Kinn cut a deal with prosecutors, pleading guilty to 3 felonies: kidnapping, first-degree criminal sexual conduct with a minor, and second-degree unintentional murder.
Why unintentional?
Because of Melissa Norby, part of her sexual gratification was to get choked out during the sex act, and there could be an argument made that she was accidentally killed.
Jacob was sentenced to 52 years in prison. The plea meant his young victim wouldn't have to face him in court, but her voice was still heard.
Your goddaughter wrote a powerful letter.
She did.
What did it say?
She told him she hated him. She does not like the way he plays with her. She does not want to play with him. But thank you for letting me play with your kitties. He bribed that baby with kitties because she loves animals. So somehow, she is strong enough with everything he did to still be thankful that she got to play with a kitty.
Cops will never know why the kidnapping plot Melissa and Jacob were planning wasn't carried out, or why he killed her. But Michelle Rogowski has come up with her own conclusion.
I can only hope and pray that it went the way it did because she was backing out. But we will never know.
Amanda Smith says her daughter is still processing what happened and coping with the trauma.
She'll tell us, what he did. She has nightmares. She has flashbacks. She talks about it at school with some of her teachers, her therapist.
Despite everything she's been through, she says her daughter is thriving and is still the rambunctious little tomboy she's always been.
Beating up her brothers, running, playing, riding bike, games, selfies.
As for the investigators who work day and night to bring her home,
they are our family. You know, all of them. If it wasn't for them, we would have lost her.
And Brittany is a hero to all of us.
Her strength is inspiring.
Oh yeah, she's resilient. She's, like I said, she's a rock. Nothing's gonna break her.
The men and women who worked so hard to find and rescue the 5-year-old were recently honored by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Their extraordinary teamwork was praised during the group's annual Heroes Award ceremony.